this is lavender perfection. And this is a so-called dinner plate. And I know that people are really amazed about very big flowers, but I think sometimes the dahlia can be too big.
Yes.
And I pinch them. And because I pinch them when they are quite small, you will have more flowers and they will be a bit smaller. I also think, Alan, your gardens is quite big.
Yes, it's 32 acres.
Yes, oh my goodness.
Very
but Alan, I could see that you was almost like a chef. You was tasting what I was saying.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to episode 62 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, all patterned and bathed in sunshine, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
And bathed in pink over in Cambridgeshire, we have Thordis Maria Sophia Friedrichsen. How are you today?
I am very well. I'm a little demob happy because I'm about to have a holiday. So excuse me if I get overly giddy. Also very excited to talk to a couple of young propagators. This week on the podcast, we're catching up with just two of the members of the vast and very exciting Young Propagator Society, or YIPS. So we have, it's kind of like boxing. In the blue corner, we've got Georgia. In the red corner, we've got Soham. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So happy to be here.
Now, we don't often have two guests, so this could descend into mayhem and complete chaos, but we'll do our best to stop that happening. Let's go round and get some middle names. Georgia, do you have a middle name to share?
I do. It's Georgia Frances.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Very serious.
Ever get called Franny, Fran?
No, I mean, I was going to be Constance Frances, so I think I avoided that one well.
Don't know, named after Constance Spry. That'd be a good.
That's true. That's very true.
Good horticultural one. Soham, what about you? Do you have any middle names?
I do. I'm Soham Sadashiv Kakkar.
That sounded fantastic. Can we have that again?
Soham Sadashiv Kakkar. It's a random name. I think my parents just picked it because they liked it.
Well, I mean, random names. Hello. I think I've cornered that one. Now, we're really lucky to have got you guys in the same country because Soham, you're normally based in India.
Yes, I'm usually based in New Delhi. I'm studying there and I've lived there all my life.
So a bit of a different climate to what most of us are used to growing in.
Oh, yes. Actually, I was talking to Georgia the other day, and when I landed in England, I felt this overwhelming feeling of complete botanical illiteracy because I know nothing about the plants here. I'm all used to the subtropicals and the tropicals.
So, Ham, you were telling me you were really excited. You got really excited because you saw some yew arils. Like you just saw some of the red, and you got really, really excited to see them.
Yeah, I've never seen yew in person before. So I saw the little red berries and I got really excited because I'd only seen them in pictures and illustrations. And the person showing me around was like, oh my God.
Oh, isn't that lovely though? Seeing our quite boring flora in completely new eyes.
Definitely.
Yeah. I always think that's actually the nice thing when you go on holiday. And Alan, you've obviously traveled all over the place with kind of gardener's eyes. So when you kind of get off the plane or you arrive somewhere, you get off a ferry, you do start looking around and quite boring wildflowers suddenly become very exciting.
Yes, because you haven't seen them before. And it's the excitement of the new, like Soham just said, never seen a yew berry before. And he was really excited to see it. Well, that's I can understand. But, Soham, I have your pictures here. They've got squiggles all over them. I'm sorry, because I had to do some writing so that I sounded like I know what I'm talking about. And some of the things I had heard of, for instance, Bauhinia.
Yes.
I've tried to grow Bauhinia from seed that I've bought, and I've never been able to grow it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but you're going to tell me it's very I suppose.
We're going to get some tips, I think. So the reason Alan's got all these pictures is because Soham doesn't have anything to show and tell because he's in the wrong country. So very cleverly, he's managed to gather together photos in advance so that we all know what he's talking about. So expect some really beautiful pictures on the video version of this podcast to tie in with Soham's show and tell. Georgia's got a plant to show us as well because she's in the right country. But before we get into the real planty, the serious geeky planty part of the podcast, I'd love to know a bit more about the Young Propagators Society. I am delighted that something like this exists at all. But how long has it been going and how did you two get involved? Georgia, let's start with you.
So it's been going since, I think it's since January 2020. So not really a hugely long time. I think I've got my years right. It gets confusing recently, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I've missed out a year completely. And it was started by Ellie Pay and Sophie Cook, who were both working in propagation nursery roles. And now Sophie is so busy with all the other amazing things she's doing. She's sort of less active with yips, but Ellie is still very much at the helm. Then I think Soham and I both joined at the same time at the beginning of this year, which seems crazy when I think about everything that's happened since then. So I can tell you we have a mission, which is in 3 parts. The first part is about disseminating propagation knowledge through the generations. And I should say it's through, it's not down, and it's not up either. The second part of our mission is to encourage more young horticulturalists into nursery and propagation roles and basically promote that. And the third part, very important, is a bit more general, and it's just to inspire learning of all areas of the natural world. So that's quite broad, but yeah, covers a lot. And yeah, I joined to do events, and I'll let Soham talk about his experience as being on the team, Yips team.
Sure, yeah. I've just been sort of on the creative team for Yips, and we recently launched our website, which is a really nice sort of community and place for people to just sort of, geek out over plants, really. And it has all sorts of people on it. We have people who have a little more experience with horticulture, people like Ellie, and we have a bunch of nursery people from all over the UK and beyond. And there are then people who are just sort of starting out with plants and have lots of questions and are trying out things for the first time. So I've sort of been coordinating the website a little bit. We have blog posts that go up fairly regularly. We have a social media page. We're on Instagram, which is sort of how it started out. I think Ellie sort of started out on Instagram. That was our main platform. And we've sort of spread from there. I've just been there to sort of help out wherever I can.
Being characteristically modest there, so stepping in to fill gaps all over the place. We should probably give a shout out to our other than Ellie, our other 2 team members, Harriet, who built the website, and Daniela, who joined us to be financial advisor, but also does lots of creative advising too.
And you organised some great stuff, like you had this Roots and Radicals event. What a great name for an event, Roots and Radicals. And
it's really important that we note that it's radicals, RADICLE. But yes, the double meaning is there. I'm so glad you mentioned that because, of course, I'm very excited about this because this is the events bit, which is what I do. And we started it in just the end of the summer. We've had 2 events so far. I can tell you all about it, but I don't want to barrage you with stuff. So I'll let you ask what you want to know about it.
No, well, first of all, great title. And I think when you first told me you were organising it, I thought it was going to be like an entirely online kind of virtual event, but you got to go and see plants and have amazing tours.
Absolutely. So as Soham said, we've got the website, which is kind of, and our social media, which is kind of the virtual space for people getting together and geeking out over plants. But we did quite early on, we thought it's really important that we just meet up in person. The whole basically every part of our mission is to get people together and, get people together and talking, and things happen from that are sort of magical. And so we were very committed to wanting to do it in person, and we have managed to do that. So yeah, it's very exciting. And the whole idea is to have them, we are going to try to have them monthly from now on.
You're going to be very busy.
We've got one planned. Yeah, we've got one planned for October, so I think we'll be all right. We had sort of a couple at the beginning and end of August rather than September, just the way the days fell. And the whole point is to sort of travel around the UK and have them at different venues around the UK, because we don't want to just be sort of London centric about it. That's where I live, so that's where the first two were. But especially with travel being easier and so on, we'll go and meet YIPS members all over the UK. And for people who can't come to the events at all, maybe they're abroad like Soham, but don't want to completely miss out, after each event I do a write-up, which is a bit more than a write-up, because there's sort of audio clips and video clips as well from the event, so you don't miss out completely.
And where did you go?
So far, our first event was at Chelsea Physic Garden. It was so exciting to be there. We had two incredible speakers, one from Chelsea Physic Garden, Jess Snowball, who's the glasshouse manager, and also, I should say, an amazing tour from some other members of her team, who took us around not just the kind of seed storage and propagation areas, but also like really cool places to see, like just where everyone hangs out and has tea. You can spy on what books they're reading and so on. And we also had Tom Freeth from Kew, head of Alpines, from Kew, giving a talk as well. And then our second one that we had was at the Brockwell Park Community Greenhouses, which is, again, an absolutely amazing space. And we had there talks from Carol Wright, who's a kind of community gardener, creative activist, extraordinaire, force of nature. And also Richard Choksey, who is another Kew-trained person. Ooh, a theme. But also now does a lot of writing, and he's a environmental natural historian. So that was a bit of a different one. Again, we're trying to have different sort of themes and different things at each one. Funnily enough, I bumped into, this is a kind of small garden world thing, Kate, who's the director of the Brockwell Park Community Greenhouses. I bumped into Kate last week when I was on holiday in Dorset. And we couldn't believe it, because we only met a few weeks ago. And of course, we bumped into each other, not just at a garden, but at the plant sales bit of the garden. So we bumped into each other in the shop at Ford Abbey. It was really funny.
Oh, lovely Ford Abbey. What did you buy?
Oh, I bought I shouldn't say ordinary. I bought a geranium, macrorrhizum, Bevan's variety, but smells so lovely. And I just needed to plug a sort of dry shade gap. So I thought that would work well.
Oh.
But Kate got much more than me. Not to shame her.
I love it. Shamed by having all the planty purchasers outed on the Talking Dirty podcast. Well, I'm so pleased that the Young Propagator Society is getting all the knowledge sort of passed around people. So Soham, of course, being in India, I suppose you've only been able to virtually enjoy these events so far.
Yeah, actually, the last one, I interacted with it through Georgia. It was really good. Like, those write-ups are fantastic. And the videos and audio, and like, you really feel like you have a little taste of the event, and which obviously really makes me want to attend one while I'm here. I think I actually, despite having been with the YIPS for almost a year, haven't met any of them in person ever. So another bucket list thing to do while I'm here.
Plants and people, bringing them all together. And talking of plants, we should start talking about some of them. Now, I know, Soham, you sent us quite a lot of pictures, so I think we should start with some of yours. And then we'll go on to a physical plant with Georgia, maybe come back to some more of your virtual plants. These are real plants, by the way. They're just... They're virtual for the podcast. How long have you been growing, Soham? Because you certainly grow some extraordinary things.
So I've actually been sort of fascinated by plants and by growing them since I was, I think, 14. Yeah, I've sort of always, my approach to plants and gardening has sort of always been very experimental. I just sort of like growing whatever I can get my hands on, and there's no order. It's complete chaos, and I've never really had a garden, as in like a space in the ground. I live in the middle of the city, and so I've always grown on a balcony with like hundreds of pots, and it's a mess, but it's a tropical exuberant mess, which I don't mind.
Oh, we love that. So different. I mean, like you may or may not know that Alan has 32 acres of soil to
Fantastic.
to play with, so we can all have a lot of acre envy, but maybe you the most with your balcony. It's amazing though what you can achieve with container gardening and a balcony. So
Absolutely.
I mean, a bit of a watering nightmare, I'd have thought.
A little bit, yeah. We do get quite hot and dry in the summer, so do need to stay on top of watering, otherwise everything starts looking quite unhappy. But I've also had the opportunity to apprentice at sort of two rather interesting locations in India, which have given me the opportunity to sort of diversify the plants that I have interacted with and grown. One of which was the Auroville Botanical Gardens in the south of India. I mean, they're just sort of like, they're very close to the coast. They have a brilliant climate, beautiful range of plants from all over the world. So, I mean, I was just like in paradise there. I was growing lots of stuff. In fact, some of the plants I've got to share are plants that I grew up there.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, let's start with one of those then. What would you like to talk about?
So all the plants that I sort of brought with me today are ones that have some sort of interest on the propagation side of things, since I am representing the Young Propagators Society today. So let's start with, actually, I think my aim was to sort of highlight all the many different ways in which propagation can happen. And I mean, there's an amazing diversity out there. So let's start with Ferocactus. It's this gigantic barrel-shaped cactus, I believe from South America. It's called Ferocactus peninsulae. And it actually produces these sort of prune-sized fruits all over the barrel. And it actually has this, it gives sort of live birth. It's called vivipary, and the seeds actually germinate while they're still in the fruit. So if you cut open a fruit, it's filled with little baby cacti instead of seeds, which is quite fantastic, actually. I was quite blown away when I first cut one open, because I was expecting seeds, but that's not what you get. And it's interesting from a propagation standpoint, because if you try to propagate the little baby cacti, they don't work that well. So because I'm not sure actually why. Maybe I think it's the sort of dark inside of the fruit that, I mean, isn't a very suitable climate, or like a microclimate, but it works much better if you actually pick this fruit while it's a bit raw and just get the seeds before they've germinated. It's a bit of a race against time.
So what actually happens? I mean, I'm looking at this picture that Thordis very kindly sent me, and I'm sort of thinking this is like a birth chamber. These pods are like birth chambers. So what you're saying is you need to pick them before they're properly ripe, the seed. And do you take the seeds out before they've made small cacti?
Yeah. So
what happens if you leave them on the mother plant?
The fruit, the wall of the fruit is too thick for anything to break through. So I think they just sort of all grow inside and die inside.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's how it sort of works.
That's very interesting, because there are certain plants that we grow in England where you almost, to get good germination, you almost want to take the seed while the seed is still green before we traditionally think it's ripe. For instance, have you heard of the Himalayan blue poppy?
Yes.
Meconopsis. Yeah, that's it. Well, to get good germination with that, we have to take the seed while it's really still green. And we think it's not ready, but it is ready. And the same thing goes for your Ferocactus peninsulae.
Yeah.
You've got to get in there. That's quite, the thing is, what I'm trying to say is that's where yips comes in, because that's a piece of knowledge that you can impart to everybody, not just in yips, but around the world. And then we'll all have gigantic barrel cacti.
I sense a post-podcast request to Alan to do a feature for our zine about propagating Meconopsis.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think Alan could do a lot of features. He's also very photogenic and very good on video. Just saying, if you ever need anything. I am fascinated though I always think it's really lovely to sort of see how things work in the wild, and obviously that often informs how you grow it, but it's fascinating how there's obviously something that happens in the wild that enables that plant to succeed with some of those baby cacti actually growing.
Yeah, I think the fruits are edible. I've eaten them. So I think they're eaten by birds in the wild, which sort of end up dispersing the seeds. But obviously, when you move it from South America to South India, the bird that eats it is probably not around.
Yeah.
So that job is left to nimble-fingered horticulturalists.
I tell you what, so how do you want to watch it? Because you'll have cacti coming out your ears if you eat it.
I think that'd be quite a good look for a member of the Young Propagator Society.
That's the dream.
Well, you certainly started strong with your first bit of show and tell, Soham. Where do we go after a cacti that produces live babies?
Well, I think we'll go to Bauhinia, which Alan was familiar with. Alan, which species did you try to grow?
The pink one, which is
variegata, probably.
I think so, yes. I don't know where I managed to get the seed from, but I don't think it could have been me, Soham. I'm not saying it wasn't, but it's either that or the seed had lost its viability. I don't know.
Bauhinias. So the reason I chose Bauhinia, and actually my show and tell is the entire genus, or at least the plants of the genus that I have grown. They're quite common in India. We have lots of different species which are pretty common in cultivation. They're very, very popular as garden plants, very floriferous throughout the dry summer months. So, I mean, obvious showstopper. But I think the reason I picked those was because they're a really good genus to highlight how just within a particular group of plants, you can have like an incredible diversity of propagation options. And it's not always that obvious which one to use on which species, which is again where something like the yips is so useful, because it's really a platform to share information and have it out there so that other people can also use it. So there are 4 species that I think I sent across. So variegata, the pink one, is one of the most common in India, and that is pretty, we usually propagate it from seed. Seed does have to be fresh, though it works better if it's fresh. So perhaps your seed was not maybe it had lost viability.
Yeah.
And another one, tomentosa, actually, named because the leaves are hairy. And they smell like curry, incidentally, which is just a fun fact. That one doesn't seem to set seed very often in India, at least not in cultivation. I think it depends on whether we have pollinators around. I have seen it setting seed, but it's not very common. So that one we typically do from air layers, which I found work quite well on that one. And there's another species, which is actually not a shrub or a tree. So variegata was a tree, tomentosa is a shrub, and vahlii, which is, I think it's been reclassified as phanera now, It's not in Bauhinia anymore. But that one is this giant tropical climber, which is crazy because what that just is unexpected. But it's this giant woody tropical climber that sort of we get in forests up north, and it sort of smothers everything. It's a little bit invasive, actually. That one comes really well from softwood cuttings if you want to propagate it, but also seed.
Be careful. Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm looking, I just have to, let me just interject for a moment, please, because I'm just looking at Bauhinia vahlii. And I mean, I can see that there's two wonderful flowers open in the picture that you've sent.
Yeah.
And they are, to me, they are absolutely glorious. I mean, I look at that and think, I want it.
They're brilliant.
It's a pest. And I can see behind the two flowers that are open, there's masses of flower buds. So it must have a huge panicle of flowers.
It does. It flowers in sort of large clusters. And it's interesting because the flowers open white and age to yellow. So they open white on day 1. And by day 3, I think they become a deep sort of amber saffron color. And then they die.
Do you think that is because they change color when they've been pollinated, so that the pollinators know not to go to that flower because I've been done, I'll go to a fresh one? Do you think?
I'm not entirely sure, actually. I would have to look that up.
Yeah.
Interesting question.
Sometimes we have honeysuckles in England that open to cream and then they fade to sort of yellowy orange, and that happens when they've been pollinated.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
My garden, just next to me.
Oh.
I was really interested in the one you said, the one before, was it tomentosa you said was good from air layering?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was you, wasn't it? You did a really good post on the YIPS website about the kind of basics of air layering.
Yeah.
It's one of the most magical seeming propagation techniques, isn't it? It just, one that I've never tried yet.
So it's over to you, because you're going to have to give us just a very brief resume of how one air layers.
Well, air layering is sort of, I started off air layering on citrus plants. There's a giant lemon tree in my dad's backyard, and that was sort of my test subject to learn air layering. But it's a process where you actually induce a plant or a stem to put out roots while it's still attached to the plant. So as opposed to conventional layering, where the stem would be bent down to the ground and sort of staked in and covered with soil so that it produces roots, air layering, you actually make a little incision along the stem and you wrap it up with a little bundle of sphagnum moss or substrate. I use vermiculite usually. And so from that scar, the place that you made an incision, and you usually peel off a bit of the top layer to expose some of the growth tissue. But basically from that point, it produces roots into the little bundle of substrate that you've dyed. And then you can actually just snip below the bundle, unpack it, and put it into the ground after a couple of months. It's quite cool, actually.
Amazing. You've made it sound so easy, Soham.
Well, I think that's a fascinating thing because, in England at the moment, we have this huge resurgence in houseplants. I mean, everywhere you go, there was even a houseplant garden at the Chelsea Flower Show this year. And I think that air layering is one of the things that possibly lots of people could try because, maybe they don't have propagation facilities as such in their flats or houses, but they could try air layering because you can actually root another plant while it's still on the mother plant, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. It works really well for lots of species of houseplants, actually. Ficuses being one of the most obvious examples.
Yeah. So it's actually great for getting people into propagating. I think houseplants, the fact that so many young people are now getting into houseplants is great for that because they are generally very easy to propagate, even if you just cut some bits off because they're getting too rampant and stick them in a bottle of water or something, you're likely to get new plants out of it. And as we often say with gardening, success tends to make you want to try other things. And therefore, if people are kind of growing these nice plants and having success, then hopefully they might set off on a propagation route.
You don't know how right you are, Thordis, because that's very, very relevant to the plant that I've brought for show and tell.
Well, that was a nice segue. Yeah, this is certainly a screen filling plant.
Yes, I'm going to go and start moving the monster. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
You can see.
It really does fill the screen.
Yes, and it's filling the air with this delicious smell as well. I think I'll have to put her here on the edge and I'll just peer through like a dunghole. I'm a bit worried it's sort of going to tip my table over. There we are. This is Lady Plymouth.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Lady Plymouth.
Yeah, welcome, lady. She's a pelargonium, like a fairly common one. I was feeling a bit embarrassed about my show and tell when I saw what Soham was bringing. And considering, you know, this is yips, I thought, oh, I'm bringing a pelargonium, and it's quite common one. But I do love her. Oh no, look.
Leaf in front of face.
Yeah, she's a bit of a, you know, attention seeker. But I really love pelargoniums partly for exactly the reason you just gave. I have to say first, I am a young propagator. I'm not really into I don't really like houseplants that much. Feels like a guilty secret. Especially as they're getting, you know, as you say, they've been getting, you know, they've been so popular, especially with kind of younger people, and that now it feels like they're getting the attention they deserve at places like Chelsea. And I can't get on board with them. I do understand if that's the only option you have, of course, I think I would be, but
hang on, I can't have this. Like, just look at the little turtles. How can you not be excited about the tiny turtles?
Those are wonderful. Those are wonderful. They are lovely.
Georgia, I think probably the reason is you haven't found the houseplant that's in your heart yet.
That's possible.
You will. But I think one of the things about Lady Plymouth and her relatives with these wonderful scented leaves is that they were terribly popular in large Victorian houses because they're reasonably hardy. They won't take frost as such, but they're reasonably hardy. And people used to grow them in these huge conservatories. And then the Victorian ladies would swish past in their voluminous dresses and they'd brush against the leaves of Lady Plymouth and her friends, and they're releasing this wonderful scent into the air. And, you know, in those days in Victorian England, smells were not always pleasant.
Once again, the perfect segue, because I have to say, I moved house. I was living in Canada last year and I'm back in England. And I had a garden for the first time, which is probably also why I became less interested in bothering with houseplants, because I had space to grow outside ones. And we had a bit of a drain smell. And I thought, pelargoniums!
Yay!
Lady Plymouth to the rescue.
Lady Plymouth to the rescue, indeed, like a sort of thunderbird. What was it, Lady Penelope? She's so fantastic, but I first grew to love pelargoniums for exactly the reason you were saying, Thordis, about, you know, I lived in a flat and I had a balcony, but barely a balcony. And I had just exactly pinched off a few sprigs to bring inside in a glass of water, and was, you know, thought I was like God's gift to propagation, when a few weeks later some roots appeared. And that was, you know, part of the beginning of my love affair with propagation and with plants generally, because they're so rewarding. Exactly. Obviously they look amazing as plants, so unfussy. I've had mine outside. I live in London, so I'm probably going to test the waters, might leave a few.
Yeah, I think you probably could get away with a few. You probably would get away with a few. But I was just going to say to you that there's another variegated pelargonium called Phyllis. And Phyllis has rather nice carmine flowers, and the variegation is much more pronounced on Phyllis, but she's an absolute devil to root. So they're not all easy to be warned. Yes.
So I shouldn't take it personally if Phyllis isn't obedient.
No, if you should take it personally if you're very successful.
That's a good way to think of it. If I propagate it, I'm a genius. If I don't, it's the plant. It's the plant.
Yes.
100%.
I mean, this is also interesting because in the garden here, we have two propagation houses, one with a mist bench and one with a warm bench. And we've just this last 2 weeks, we've just washed them inside and out, cleaned all the rubbish out. And, we're ready to launch into our huge main propagation period of the year because we grow lots of tender plants. Soham, do you have Brugmansia in India?
Yes.
Yeah. But you have them probably growing as trees.
Yeah, they get quite large.
Well, I've got them in pots, and I always take cuttings from them every year. But our big ones that we've got in pots outside, they're in huge containers, actually, as big as a table, and they're probably carrying about 250 flowers on each of them as I speak. And Thordis, yes, you can have a photograph. But that's the kind of things that we propagate, and so we need all the different ways of propagating. And I'm going to try air layering now after Soham put it so eloquently that it sounds terribly easy. I bet I won't be successful.
That's the great thing about propagation, isn't it? Well, again, as Soham was saying, all the different ways there are to do it, but also, I've learned so much from Yips too about how there is so much difference of opinion about all sorts of things. One of the features we have in the zine is a sort of interview, and we ask the same questions to different people. So things like, do you believe in rooting hormone, or what substrate do you like? And the answer, you get really like strongly different opinions, but we're all about celebrating all of them.
It's very interesting. You should just mention rooting hormones, because I was listening to in my ears Christopher Lloyd's, I think it was The Adventurous Gardener, or one of his early books, and he explained an awful lot about propagation. And he was talking to a friend of his and said that certain plants were very difficult to propagate, and the his friend said, no, they're not. And he said, well, I use rooting hormone powder. And he said, well, is it fresh? And Christo, being of a parsimonious nature, had to say, no, it's approaching 20 years old. And he'd been using the same pot for 20 years old. And he said, I had to force myself to go and buy a new pot. And I have to say that my friend was completely right, because the plants that I thought had been difficult to propagate, with fresh rooting hormone, they were no longer difficult.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It is true, though. I mean, the world of horticulture, so many different opinions on, what works for one person might not work for another. But sometimes it is magic, and you do need some very specific temperatures, light, darkness, different substrates, whatever. So being able to share all of those tips and tricks, very, very exciting and very important. I also love this. I mean, we are always pretty nerdy on this podcast, but this is definitely next level, and it's making me very happy.
I also noticed that the Bauhinia variegata is used in cooking.
It is.
Yes, and they do you know how they do it?
Well, I've never actually eaten anything made from Bauhinia variegata, but I do know that the flowers and the buds in particular are pickled. They make a pickle out of them.
They also make a curry out of the buds as well. Or at least...
I haven't heard of that.
Yes.
This sounds like a good way to deal with your invasive plants.
Yeah.
This reminds me when someone told me that apparently you can eat Japanese knotweed.
Really?
Yes.
Apparently it's edible, like sort of poor man's asparagus or something.
Not just that, I think it's been recently discovered that if it's included in a medicine, it can help to treat quite a few major diseases.
Oh.
Wow.
I feel like I should do that sort of disclaimer. We do not encourage you to go and eat
Japanese knotweed into yourself for the COVID.
No, it's a very specialised business, and it has to be done by a pharmaceutical factory, I think.
There we go. Just don't eat it, just in case you blame us. We don't want to get sued. No, Soham, I've slightly lost track of where we've got to with your show and tell.
Right, but it's actually what you were saying last was again very good segue into my next two plants. You were talking about very specific sort of temperatures and conditions and substrates, but to offer a contrasting opinion, propagation is very often just like complete trial and error, and I think I've had my fair share of brushes with trial and error and often complete failure, but at some other times, I mean, unexpected benevolence from whatever I'm trying to propagate. Two sort of plants fall into this category in my show and tell. One of them is actually a species of wild ginger that grows in the foothills of the Himalayas, where we usually spend summers in India. And it's called Zingiber Chrysanthemum. Nothing to do with chrysanthemums, but oh well. And I actually, I saw, just when I was hiking one day, I saw these sort of extraordinary red fruiting bodies just sort of coming out of the ground. No leaves, no flowers, no nothing, just this sort of red fruit on the ground. And it has these, like, I'm sure you'll have a photo up on the screen, but it has these sort of rows of white fruits inside, which look eerily like teeth. And it's actually quite a weird experience to see it, because my first response was, oh, it's like a dead animal or something. And then I took a closer peek, and it was these fruits of this ginger. I didn't know at the time it was a ginger, but I sort of looked it up later. But I collected seeds, and I was very excited because I had never grown any sort of ginger from seed before, and I was really eager to try. So I read up a bunch of websites, and I did my research and leafed through a bunch of books, and came up with like 2 or 3 different ways of propagating them. So I soaked some of them, I treated some of them with hot water, I scarified some of them, filed them down with a nail file, and like all different sort of things. And I very carefully labeled them into pots and everything, and put the dates on them, like full setup. But so, and then I just waited sort of 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, nothing happened, no signs of life whatsoever. So I took all of these pots and I just sort of emptied them back into some other tray that I was planting up. And I actually happened to plant that tray with larkspur because I was planting winter flowers. And then come February next year, this was around September or August when I had planted these seeds, and come February next year, there's these gingers popping up through my larkspur, and I have no clue which treatment worked because I mixed them all up, and like ginger in profusion, like my larkspur was outnumbered. So I have no clue now what to sort of. I keep a diary or like record of everything that I grow and how I grew it, but I have no clue what to write next to this. Like, what do I write?
You'll have to do it again, Soham.
I will.
Sometimes seedlings can catch us out, because I once sowed some seed from a particularly good form of a variegated arum, and all the seeds came up with green leaves, and I thought, well, this is no good. And I threw the whole lot away. And then a friend told me, but they don't get variegation on the seedlings until they're 2 years old.
Oh, no.
So you do learn by these mistakes. It's
yeah,
it's quite interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. And oftentimes you may try all the fancy techniques, but it might just be like neglect that gets something to grow. I mean, it's crazy.
I love how we managed to cover kind of air layering, softwood cuttings, and now just luck when it comes to propagation.
But luck has a part to play, I think, in this as well, because I remember when I was a small boy, there was an old lady in the village, and she was particularly good at growing Daphnes from seed. And I think it was probably Daphne mezereum, and she was very good at growing. And she gave people plants throughout the the village, you know, but only if they were churchgoers. Like, she didn't get anything, but she was very good at doing this. And I know from experience that growing Daphnes from seed is a long, slow, quite laborious process. And I think what she must have had was extreme patience, because it does take a long time to get a decent sized plant. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, my last plant for show and tell is sort of definitely drives home the point of luck. Because actually, so this is a tiny little herb from the pea family, called Chesnia Cuniata. It's a weed, I later found out, but I found it growing quite dramatically, actually, on some granite cliffs when I was trekking 2 summers ago in Ladakh. And I thought it was some brilliant rare species. Of course, I didn't know at the time that it was like pretty much not at all relevant. And it actually grows quite a bit in the high altitude regions in India. But so I collected a single seed pod because the plant I found had only one sort of seed pod on it, and it looks sort of like a constricted pea. And I put it in my pocket of my pants, which had a zip on it. So I shut the zip, and then I conveniently forgot that it was there. So I came back to Delhi from my trip, and the pants went into the washer, and seed pod still there. And it must have been probably a month before I put those pants on again, and I reached into the pocket, and there was the Chesneya seed pod. And it had since opened and released the seeds, and there were about 6 of them. So I had 6 seeds, and I decided to give it a spin anyway. And I put the seeds into a pot, and they did end up germinating because, I mean, it does grow quite readily. Fabaceae, it's quite straightforward, I think, in most cases. But again, like, I had no clue what to write next to that plant because I was like, put in washer, then try germinating.
Yeah, exactly. I had, like, at that first Roots and Radicals, Tom was telling us all about smoke treatment for seeds, you know, from, you know, like proteas and that. Well, was it proteas? Can't remember, but smoke treatment. But yeah, I've never heard of washing machine treatment.
Then also you've got to, like, what detergent was it? Was it on 30 degrees, 40 degrees? Was this a short wash, a long wash? Is that relevant?
Oh, dear.
Well, certainly a variety of propagation methods included in your show and tell, Soham. You did very well on that front.
I think what I love about this is, yeah, I mean, I wonder where that sometimes when you read really kind of long, convoluted guides to propagating something, like, I wonder whether somewhere along the line with kind of knowledge being passed from one person to the other, some of these weird eccentricities have got passed on, and someone's just gone, oh, better just put down washer anyway, just in case.
Well, particularly if it's something really hard to grow. I mean, once you'd worked out it was basically a weed, you're thinking, oh, it's going to grow anyway. But actually, if it was something that was really difficult to propagate, you begin to wonder, hang on a minute, was a 40-degree hour-long soak what it needed to get it going? Oh, this has been so much fun. Wonderful show and tell, whether it was a fantastic pelargonium of stately proportions, totally strokeable and totally centered, or this amazing array from India, which I'm sure Alan's going to have a little bit of FLOMO about. We always like to squeeze in some FLOMO before we wrap up a podcast, and it's basically because that's how I live my life, just going around, seeing plants, seeing flowers, and thinking, I want to grow you. It's given me loads of fear of missing out. So let's go round and see what everybody's got to bring to the table. So, Georgia, what's your FLOMO?
So, as you can imagine, very difficult to narrow it down to, you know, anything. I've narrowed it down to 2. I hope I'm allowed 2.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned last year I was living in Canada, which, you know, gave me the opportunity to fall in love with a whole new collection of plants. And there are a couple of Canadian plants that now I just really, really want. One is one that I'd already encountered before, actually at Chelsea in 2018. I went back and found the photo. In 2018 at Chelsea, and I can't remember which stand it was, someone had a Cornice Canadensis, and it's just so cute. I don't know whether you know, it looks sort of, you know, that the leaves and flowers are sort of like, you know, Cornus florida, you know, it's sort of those lovely, perfect little arrangement of very nice green and very nice white with the green center. And these, yeah, I saw it at Chelsea, tried to find it in the years following, couldn't really find it, didn't have anywhere to grow it. And then in Canada last year, I was on a hike and I was walking along, and then I realized that what I was trampling underfoot was loads of Cornice Canadensis, its native habitat. So the passion was ignited again, and now I'm absolutely set on finding that. Oh, it's so lovely, and also it has after the flowers, it has these lovely bright red berries. So it's just very cute. And my other Flomo plant would be something a little harder to find, I think, than Cornice Canadensis. I think I would take at this point any trillium of any kind. I would love the ones with the really amazing, you know, splotchy foliage, but any trillium. I don't know. Do either of you?
Wow.
I somehow doubt trilliums would be that happy in India, but I'm not sure. Okay.
I don't think they'd be happy in India, but they'll be happy. I hope they're going to be happy in my garden because I've just bought some.
Oh, have you?
Well, they arrived in August, in actual fact, which is the correct time to move them around and things. And I found a lady that's been growing trilliums from seed.
Wow.
And she gets these, and you know that they're
slow.
Well, they're sort of understory woodland plants, aren't they? So
Yeah.
they like quite a lot of shade, not complete shade, but dappled shade. So you get shafts of sunlight coming through occasionally. So I've organised a piece of garden for that, and I'm gradually building up a collection of them. And I just think that they are such lovely plants. They're expensive when you buy them because from seed to flowering can be as long as 10 years. It's normally around about 5, but it, you know, some of the rarer ones, it can be 10 years. And that 10 years of looking after a plant before you can sell it has got to be paid for goodness sake.
Yeah,
you know? So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so so I'm hoping I'm going to get a nice collection of them.
So which is the one you've just acquired then?
Oh, goodness me, I knew you'd say that. Well, there were 5 different ones, Georgia, and I can't remember.
I'm sure they're all beautiful. I have to tell you though, Alan, I mean, obviously, yeah, you're completely right about what they prefer, you know, how they grow. And I didn't see them in the wild in Canada, but where I did see them very kind of irritatingly was all over people's front gardens, like we have daffodils, you know, just randomly. And they weren't fussy in Canada. They were growing in full sun. They were growing in horrid, scrubby little bits of dry soil. It's just, yeah. Another thing,
Georgia, it makes you sick.
It does. It's the opposite. So, well, I suppose it's similar to Soham being really excited about seeing you. It's just, yeah, traveling and seeing these plants. I was going to mention actually that way back when you asked me how I got into yips and we were talking about Instagram, that's actually how Ellie found me and how I came to join the team, because I hope it's okay. I'm not plugging it, but it's so relevant. I run a different Instagram account called the Lockdown Gardening Archive, where I do profiles of gardeners from all over the world. And what's happening now, people being excited about what in the home country is a very boring plant, happens all the time. People growing amazing things and people going, oh, that's just, you know, a weed in my back.
That sounds like a great one to follow. We're always happy for gardening related plugs on this podcast. Soham, what's your Flomo?
I think a plant that I've wanted for a really long time is the bat flower. I'm not sure if people have heard of it. It's Tacca chantieri, I think is the Latin name, or Tacca integrifolia, either one. But it's this really cool sort of black flower with 2 white bracts that look like bat wings. And the reason I want it actually is, firstly, the foliage is beautiful. It's like a peace lily foliage, sort of bold, tropical, large leaves. But also, I don't think people know exactly how it's pollinated in the wild. So I really want to see the flowers up close. So yeah, that's one that I really wanted to grow.
Oh, amazing. This is another reason why I like having Flomo as a feature, is the vast array of things that people want to grow. Black flowers is actually a bit relevant to my Flomo, which is also a pelargonium. So bringing all the strands together. And this is one I shared with Alan. I WhatsApped over saying, I don't know if you've got this, but I really want it. And it's a Pelargonium gibosum maroon. And the maroon there kind of gives you a hint because the edges of the little petals, so little starry pelargonium flowers, and the edges are like a deep, dark, blackish purple. And then the center is a creamy yellow. Oh!
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Sounds beautiful.
So, and I think if you live near Derry Watkins at Special Plants, I think she might have some on her nursery, but she doesn't post them out. So I don't live near Derry, so I haven't been able to go and get one. But
time for a road trip.
Yeah, it just that looked amazing. You know, like you're scrolling through Instagram and then you just go. Ah! I think it was Christoph Howell on Instagram I have to thank for that. So thank you for posting it. And hopefully, get a photo on screen so everyone can see it on the video version of the podcast. And then I always leave Alan till last because then there's no danger that he'll show us all up. What's your Flomo this week, Alan?
Well, one of them comes from today and talking to Soham, actually. But the one that I had written down before that, Thordis and I were lucky enough to be at the Chelsea Flower Show on press day. And there was a stand there which was called Surreal Succulents. And the guys there, they live in Penzance in the very southwest of England. They have crossed sempervivums or house leeks with aeoniums.
To give you a Semponium. I mean, what a great thing.
It sounds like an orchestra. I'm going to give you a Semponium. And what they're hoping is that the progeny from the cross will look like aeoniums and be hardy. And that, if they can stand some frost, that would be a great help to many, many English gardeners that love them. Now, my second one is from you, Soham. It's Kigelia africana. And
yeah.
I want to say I know this from somewhere, but I can't remember where. Now, whether I've tried it from seed at any point or not, I don't know. But it's known as the sausage tree. But can you tell us a little more about it, please?
Yeah, Kigelia is actually not native to India at all. It's an import from Africa. And it's a beautiful, large, low-branching tropical shade tree. It's called the sausage tree because the fruits are sort of these really large. I think they can weigh up to like 5 kilos.
Ooh.
And they're these huge sausages. And actually the only place I know it planted in my city is, unfortunately enough, there are 6 trees in a parking lot. So not very convenient because there's always sort of this looming gigantic fruit hanging above your car, which you're really hoping doesn't fall down. But I recently actually found one on the ground, luckily not on anyone's car. And I opened it up and I actually do have, if they're still alive in my absence, I have an entire tray full of little Kigelia seedlings now.
Oh, lucky you.
So, yeah, I wish I could send you some. But yeah, it's a spectacular tree. They're beautiful, really large. Also, these fleshy maroon flowers that sort of hang down on spikes. They're very beautiful. Yeah. Well, I think Kew Gardens has a tree.
Well,
in one of their classes.
I might be able to get seed from there then, because I'd love to try it. I've got a tall glass house, which I call the Pelargonium house, because I have a large collection of old-fashioned pelargoniums, and like Lady Plymouth, of course. And I would very much like to have a go at growing that in there. So, 3 seeds in an envelope would be very useful.
It would certainly make a difference in the car park at East Ruston Old Vicarage to crab apples.
I don't think it would live outside. It would have to live under glass, I think.
It's a shame. Oh, thank you so much, you two, for coming along and just sharing so much planty joy for the last hour. It has just been so much fun.
Well, I think that the enthusiasm that you two have shown is outstanding. I mean, we didn't know what to expect. We we were sort of rather preparing ourselves the other day when we were talking about it. What if they don't talk? Because young people can sometimes be quite shy. Thank God you can talk.
And no risk of that. No risk of us not talking.
Well, it's been an absolute joy to meet you both. And I mean, and such, diverse plants from the continent of India and to Canada, to England. It's been wonderful. Thank you both very much.
And we're also now going to go and see yew trees and feel full of fresh wonder, seeing them as if with new eyes.
Thank you so much for having us.
Not at all. You're very, very welcome.
How do people come and join the Young Propagator Society?
Well, you don't have to do anything. You can sign up on our website, can't you? I'll let Soham do the website bit. I was just about to say something completely wrong there, so...
No, not at all. There's a form on our website which you can fill up, and that's it. You're a part of YIPS.
Very easy.
And very easy, very easy. And you can follow us on Instagram, and that's about it. Yeah.
I was going to say it's really important to mention that it's free to join YIPS,
Yes.
and our zines as well are free. I mean, we do have ways to donate if you want to support us. But same with the events, we want to keep them free to attend or accessible to attend, because we really want to encourage everyone to feel that they can join and get excited about horticulture, get excited about propagation.
It's a great idea to make them free. Let's just spread the magic of propagation. And I am sure that the Young Propagator Society will be making a repeat appearance on Talking Dirty. But for the time being, thank you very much for your time, for your plants, for your knowledge, for your general enthusiasm and joy. And happy gardening.
Happy gardening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's funny, I live really close to a place that's called Soham, but pronounced in a much less nice way.
There was a murder in
murder.
Soham.
I wasn't going to say that.
Yeah,
I did.
I have nothing against Soham, but I like Soham better.
Yeah, Soham. We go with Soham, and then people won't think about the famous murders.
To encourage everyone to feel that they can join and get excited about
Out of
horticulture.
interest, Soham, is there a fire alarm going off in your building?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think there is.
It's a very good point to end the podcast so you can evacuate.